I talk very indistinctly, so please let me know if you can't hear me. Now, as I've said, both of the local papers stuck to the rules of the censors, even though Lord Hawhorn had announced on German radio at tea time on Black Friday that the Ransome and Marles ball and roller bearing factory in Newark had been obliterated by the glorious Luftwaffe. Remember Lord Hawhorn?
Yeah.
And his sneering nasal tones, Germany calling, Germany calling. His real name was William Brooke Joyce, born in the USA. They got a lot to answer for. In 1906, he described himself as an Irish-British fascist politician, and he spent the whole of the Second World War spouting Nazi propaganda to the United Kingdom. This picture was taken to him just after he'd been captured, and he'd been shot, and I think the beggar's still sneering. But he was convicted of high treason in 1945 and was hanged at Wandsworth Prison on the 3rd of January 1946. Quite how British justice managed to do that to an American citizen who committed his crimes in Germany, I'm not sure, but that was the kind of war, that was the kind of thing that war did. And by then, a few months after the Second World War ended, you'd have thought that someone around here would have got around to recording the full story of Newark's Black Friday. But immediately after the Second World War, I suppose the emphasis was on looking forward. Certainly in my family, nobody talked about anything like that, and one of my very much older sisters and my even older brother, both born of my dad's first marriage, they'd actually lived through this, and I never heard them whisper a word about it. They never said a word about this day during family gatherings, because Newark, Ransome and Marles in particular, simply wanted to build a better future for this area. And Ransome and Marles workforce certainly did that. They turned Newark into something like the kind of powerhouse envisaged. That's why I winced when Tim said that I was a powerhouse in newspaper production. I'm not a powerhouse anything like Ransome and Marles was. They turned Newark into something like the kind of powerhouse that had been envisaged by the borough engineer of Newark at the start of the Great War. His name was Joseph Wilkes, and when I was researching Newark in the Great War, I discovered that he told Newark Tradesmen's Association that as the town was at the meeting point of the Great North Road, the Fosse Way, the Great North Eastern Railway Line and the Midland Railway Line, with the River Trent capable of powering endless electricity supplies, there was no reason why Newark should not become as big a powerhouse in the East Midlands as Birmingham was in the West Midlands. Now, he said that a week before Christmas 1914. We were hip deep in the Great War against Germany, and this bloke had that vision for Newark. To me, cynical journalist, it seems laughable now, because we're thoroughly bypassed. There are no railway sidings packed with goods trains ready to take our stuff away that our manufacturing industry churn out. But for 30 or so years after the Great War, Ransome and Marles, its little neighbour Abbots, Worthington Simpson at Lowfield, Nicholson's at the Trent Works, Farrer's Boilers, Quibel's Glue Factory, etc., 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 a couple of breweries to quench our thirst, shaped as if Newark would be a manufacturing giant forever. And I suppose as the future brightened, the urge to look back on Black Friday by people like me who play with words simply never arose. They were too busy reporting on the excitement of what was happening in the day. And as I say, I was as complacent as everyone else. They say familiarity breeds contempt, and I freely admit I've been as guilty as most Newark-born folk of taking the old place for granted. I remember playing cricket with a bloke who's still a friend of mine called Derek Hoff. He lives in Balderton, and he worked at Ransome and Marles for years and years and years, and he often used to talk at tea time and things like that about things that were happening in the factory and so forth. And one day our captain, a bloke called Ray Etherington, who knew nothing at all about Newark because he was a foreigner, he came from Western, he said, "So Derek, how many people work at Ransome's?" And without breaking into chewing his lettuce sandwich, Derek said, "Oh, about half," you know. And this was in the, what would it be, Chris, when I was a fast bowler, in the 60s. Oh, God. Yeah, I'm pleased somebody does. I thought it was a dream. Anyway, I took the old place for granted until, as I say, I was walking my Labrador across the moors between North Muscombe and Batley last Wednesday, the 9th of November. And I was at peace with the world because I've just launched my last 2 books based on the Great War. This is not a plug, really. And I'd solemnly promised my wife, who's walking the dog this morning, but you'll see her later, that I wouldn't dent our bank balance again until 2019, when I plan to bring out Newark in World War II as a mate for Newark in the Great War that Tim was good enough to mention earlier. Oh, that's not Newark in the Great War, that's the one that came as a result of walking a dog, giving me time to think, and I got thinking about Tim and Lawrence Goff, both telling me that the 75th anniversary of Black Friday was coming up. And then I got thinking about old friends in the villages telling me of their memories of the day, running terrified from school, being machine gunned. And then I got thinking that 2 of those old friends had recently passed away. And I realised that if we waited another few years, there'd be nobody left to talk to about that terrible day when Newark nearly died. So I phoned Tim to make sure the definitive book of Black Friday had not already been written, because I'm not a great reader, because I like writing. Then I got in touch with the lovely Lucy at the Advertiser to ask her to help me find folk with memories of the day. And then I got to panic. And not just because I thought I ought to tell my lovely wife, Jilly, that, sorry dearest, but I've had another thought about another book to bite into our little pension. I began to panic because I got such a wonderful response. Phone calls, emails, Facebook messages from many of you who are here today. So many that I seriously worried whether I could do you all justice within the time scale. And then Tim mentioned that he knew a bloke who'd researched the Germans who carried out the attack, a bloke called Sean Noble. He's a postman by trade, and he's come up with first-class delivery so far as I'm concerned. I'm sure you'll agree when you hear him in a couple of minutes' time. I also turned to Chris Grant, who responded magnificently, even though he was not in the best of health at the time. Don't tell him this, I'm going to hide now from him, he can't see me. I have worshipped Chris Grant. Right, he was a better cricketer than me, a beggar. He was a teacher. I never was able to teach, really. He's been an inspiration to countless thousands through his teaching, through his work, voluntary work with the Operatic Society, teaching people to enjoy themselves, encouraging people to enjoy themselves, organising trips to Great War areas so that people who lost relatives over 100 years ago or 100 years ago know the full horror of what happened to them. And now, he, despite, as I say, not being tremendously well, he's helped me enormously with this book. And let me be perfectly clear, Newark's Black Friday could not have been written, designed and printed without Sean and without Chris, or without the brilliance of Wilson's, the printers, who amazingly are on Cross Street, and if they'd looked out of their windows on the 7th of March 1914, they'd have seen those hindquarters advancing on Ransomes. And the book certainly could not have been contemplated without folk like you, because this is not my story, it's yours. It's such a compelling story that many more than once I stayed at my little laptop. See, it's still dusty, I haven't had time to clean it. And to a specific segment of the story.